and welcome to Shok Talk. I'm Allison Shok.
And I'm Richard Shok.
We are so excited. I know Rich, more than anybody, is so excited to have Richard Price here with us today. Rich Price is a retired fire chief and the founder of PulsePoint, which Rich is going to nerd out for the next hour about. One of our favorite innovations that we're aware of in the EMS world. But a little bit more about Rich. He is a 2024 AHA resuscitation champion. He was named recently the recipient of the James O. Page Award from the International Association of Fire Chiefs for being an exceptional leader, creating innovations in the world of EMS. Has been named one of Government Technology's top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Allison.
Well, if you don't mind, we'll just dive in. We would love for you to take us back to the beginning, your history of the fire service and what was kind of the inspiration for PulsePoint.
Yeah, that Genesis story. I was out to lunch and was unaware of a nearby need for CPR and an AED, even though I was really close. So that was kind of the start. It was kind of a surreal day. I'm at lunch. I hear a siren in the distance. I'm on duty. I'm the fire chief. I'm in uniform in this restaurant. And, like you occasionally do, you hear a siren, and that siren, grew louder and got closer. And, even though I was the fire chief, I wasn't aware of every medical call that was going on in the jurisdiction. I had a pager. They can page me if they needed me. And they ultimately pulled up right in front of this restaurant, and right next door, there was somebody who was unconscious, unresponsive, probably, less than 50 feet away from me. I just was unaware of it and likely could have made a difference in that outcome. I had 25 years, 28 years or something in the fire service at that time, had an AED in my vehicle right in front of this restaurant. And that was the story where we started thinking about, San Ramon, where I was the fire chief in Northern California, was an agency that was doing a lot of things right around, they were training citizens in CPR. They were placing AEDs. We ran the dispatch center there. They were doing, telecommunicator CPR. We were the advanced life support agency. And even though we were doing all those things, it was sort of shocking that I could be so close to a cardiac arrest, not be aware of it. And we thought, we have a phone. The phone knows where I'm at. Dispatch center knows where the cardiac arrest is. Could have I had some other way to be alerted to that? Firefighters don't go to calls they see. They go to calls that they're told that they're needed at. And with CPR, you have to witness it. And could we do it more like firefighters, where the phones were like a radio, and could we notify somebody that they were near cardiac arrest? So that was kind of the back of the napkin at the restaurant. How could something like this happen? And that was the start of PulsePoint.
Wow, it's a really incredible story, and we know that you've gone from the initial iteration of PulsePoint, where we rely on citizen responders to be dispatched, people that are trained in CPR that can lend a hand and get an AED, and then we also know you've started with a verified responder program as well as an AED registry, and have been making far-reaching strides to becoming a national standard for AED registry. Could you tell us a little bit more about those kind of inroads and inflections on why you've gotten to those points?
Yeah, so a couple of questions in there, Rich. So as we think about like the verified responder program, professional responders, PulsePoint originally was only activating in public spaces. It was at the time was, a pretty revolutionary idea. That was like 12 years ago. We're gonna alert citizens to nearby cardiac arrest, major medical emergencies. And, there was concern about that. Like, what could go wrong in a situation like that? It's funny to think back on some of the things we worried about back then that, didn't actually happen, but we weren't really sure. So we kept it in the public space only. So this means that there was other people present. Um, our alerts go out the same time the fire department is dispatched. So citizens are there for several minutes ahead of time, but it was public only. The Verified Responder Professional program extended it to residents. So private residents are alerted now
Mm-hmm.
for known responders. So these are typically off-duty firefighters, police officers, in some cases municipal employees, but hospital staff, but known to the agency and approved for residential response. So that's kind of the, we know that the majority of cardiac arrests are in private homes. So that's an important piece to fill in. And the AED registry was always important to us because we wanted to alert people to a nearby cardiac arrest and to alert them to the presence of an AED nearby, so we could, put AEDs in motion more often. Now we've taken that a lot further today with various things we're doing, but that just kind of touches on the professional responder aspect. And how we got started in the registry was originally just for ourselves to be able to, make our responders aware of them.
Really cool. And backing up, when you were starting, when the Genesis event happened, you were at that time were serving as the chief for your local department, also had a Heart Safe community and coordinating dispatch. Is that
Yes.
right? And then that was all the first iteration was for your community.
Right. So when we had this idea, there's a lot going from an idea to the realization of actually, hey, maybe this is a good idea. We could dispatch our citizens to, cardiac arrests. It was a big idea, but to actually sort of see that through, that was a couple of years to, convince elected officials that this was a good idea, to think about just the technology aspect. So if you go back, this is around like iOS 3. So how early we are in this game. So iOS 2 is where the App Store became available, right? iOS 1 didn't have an App Store. iOS 2 had the App Store. iOS 3 had push notifications. So the technical aspect of this was a little bit of a stretch. It was like right there in the point of time that maybe this was even possible technically. So we spent about a year kind of building this out. And when you think about like building this out in a fire departments don't have mobile app developers, right? So we had to look like, how could we even take an idea like this and see it through? Now, we had the dispatch center. We knew where the cardiac arrests were occurring. We understood the problem, the dispatch center. We were training citizens in CPR. We knew where our AEDs were. We knew a large part of sort of the problem we were trying to solve, but we didn't have app developers. So we actually partnered with a university, NKU, Northern Kentucky University, who had an app development program. This is very early on. This is like 2009, 2010. There's not a lot of like iOS developers. It's not like it is today. So putting the pieces together to actually build a prototype of this and then convince our fire department served multiple communities to get multiple city councils and elected officials and city attorneys comfortable with giving this a shot. So we spent about a year building it. We spent about a year testing it. We had great results. The very first time it activated, it was at a coffee shop downtown on a weekend, and 8 people responded, and 2 were doing CPR,
Wow.
and 6 people were clapping to 100 beats a minute and encouraging the other responders. And it was quite a scene for those first responders to arrive and see. So it was exciting time, being involved in a project like that and sort of seeing it come to fruition. But, from that initial shock of the event to actually being able to see that through, well, there's a lot of pieces there.
I got chills when you said that. People were standing there clapping a beat for the person doing compressions.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we found is like, it takes a lot of courage, right? You guys know it. You're teaching CPR. It takes a lot of courage to do CPR. And, But when there's multiple people, right, even when there's two responders, the difference between one responder and two responders makes a big difference. So being able to bring multiple responders to the scene is like one of the advantages, right? It's maybe somebody, even if they witness the arrest and they're doing CPR, to be able to bring more people in behind them to take over. It's physically demanding, to encourage, to second person to find an AED, or a third person, people to direct the responders in. Multiple responders was sort of a big advantage that we hadn't even thought about.
Wow, and the fact that so many people did jump in when they got that alert. What was the initial buy-in for people downloading the app and out of your community?
Yeah, so you're thinking about that as you're putting the pieces together. Those are the kind of the things like, could we get people to download the app? Would people be willing to carry the app and respond? That was something we weren't sure, right? Could we make the app work? And even if we could we get people to participate? And we had an advantage, because we had a lot of advantages because this was our own agency, right? So I was the fire chief, so I was a trusted voice in the community. I knew the elected officials, I knew the medical directors. We knew the local training centers. Like we could build a team and do our own sort of announcement to our own community. We already had all the channels to be able to do notifications like that. So we just took advantage of all those things and really were able to have a pretty loud voice in the community. That would be harder to duplicate down the road, right? Because when it wasn't your own agency doing this, but in this particular case, we had control of the dispatch system. We had, we were known. Like, there were a lot of advantages in that very first implementation.
Very neat. When you guys were first getting started with this, what was the original kind of take that the city council and everyone had when you first pitched it?
I think that there was hesitation. It was, it was viewed as we're gonna dispatch citizens to major medical emergencies, right? That if you spin it like that, that sounds pretty daunting. And I would say, well, we're already training people in CPR. We're already telling them to interact. The only difference is maybe they're in the business next door. Maybe they're on the floor above. Maybe they're not witnessing it, but they're right there. Same idea holds. So I would try to explain it more in that context than like we're already telling citizens to engage in medical emergencies. So I think, again, this goes back to the advantage I had is I was known to the council. I had a track record, some shared experiences, trust with them. Again, it was one of those early advantages. But even though they wanted the industry to weigh in on this, they wanted the Heart Association, they wanted Red Cross, they wanted experts to weigh in on this. And I think it's of any idea that you have. You have a big idea, you want to do something, maybe your friends at the gym aren't the best ones to bounce the idea off of, or the kitchen table at the firehouse. They wanted to know what the industry thought of this. I actually attended, what's the Cardiac Arrest Survivor Summit, what they call it today, but it was ECCU. Yeah, yes. It was ECCU back then. I actually attended that. We set up a room off the show floor and we invited American Heart and Red Cross and resuscitation scientists, people who were going to be at that event, to come in and kind of hear out the idea. I went to Seattle. I met with, Dr. Kopis and Dr. Ray and others. And we sort of sought out experts, Dr. Brooks out of Toronto and Queen's University, and people that we found would be able to give us an opinion on the idea. And then that was part of what I had to present to the city councils is were there concerns, were there blind spots that maybe we weren't considering? And so we did quite a bit of research and sort of, we're thoughtful in the approach. And then it was like, all right, we'll give it a try. Let's see what happens. And there was, people had funny ideas like, oh, we're going to bring too many people to the scene and people are going to be fighting over whose AED gets to be used. And we're like, I don't know. I really don't think that stuff's going to happen. But, we heard like all kinds of things. It's going to, but Now, we know, but back then I really couldn't say exactly what was going to happen. It took experience, but I had enough goodwill with those elected officials that I was allowed to proceed.
Truly amazing. And we know, like, we've going on to the PulsePoint website, there's a little clock on there that shows that the average response time for a community that has integrated PulsePoint into their dispatch systems has 2 minutes as a citizen responder time. And then we know that the average response time for fire and EMS, first responders to arrive on scene nationwide, is about 6 to 7 minutes. So, being able to pull resources there that can start this truly when seconds matter and seconds count, 4 to 6 minutes prior to trained rescuers' arrival is really remarkable. And I'm curious, do you have like stats and data as to how that has affected overall survival rates in communities that have implemented PulsePoint?
Yeah, so the Cardiac Arrest Survival Registry, so the CARES registry, produces results in both all communities and PulsePoint connected communities.
Yeah.
So they show the results segmented that way. So it does show, and they're measuring various things, bystander CPR rates, AED usage, survival rates, things like that. So you can look at that on the CARES registry. So they published a separate report on that. And I don't think it's any surprise that, PulsePoint communities do perform better. But these are agencies that are already trying hard. PulsePoint will make a difference in communities that are already doing the basics well, right? It can't replace the basics. Even though I think when we think about PulsePoint, when it first came out, it was pretty revolutionary, but it wasn't disruptive. Most things that are revolutionary, they're disruptive in some way. But PulsePoint took good work that was already being done and kind of amplified it. If you were training a lot of citizens in CPR, we could add efficiencies and get them to more locations. If you were placing AEDs, we would leave less to chance because we would show people, hey, you're near AEDs. And you maybe were doing a really good job with your advanced care and your paramedics, but if BLS wasn't started, they would arrive in pretty deep holes at 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Not just arrival times, but like patient side times, even further out there. So we were taking systems that were doing the basics well, right? There's a statement that says good ALS begins with good BLS. And so we were helping BLS, and that would help all the way through to survival rates. And that's certainly, what we've seen. And I would encourage people to go to the stats there. So that's pulsepoint.org/stats. And it does we show a system-wide response time. And it is, I think it's like 2 minutes, 10 seconds, something like that. And it'll vary. You'll see that go up and down because we're reacting to about 800 cardiac arrests a day now. So that stat, yeah. So you'll see that, like, if you were to go to that stat, you would see exactly how many cardiac arrests we've had reported to us from connected agencies over the last 24 hours. But that usually runs around around 800 right now. And response times, are around 2 minutes, 10 seconds. But response times are great because we're only alerting people who are very close by. Right. So that's important to recognize. Like, if you were to look at like maybe where EMS posts are, where fire stations are in a community, they're throughout the community. But if you look at a map of PulsePoint responders, they're like completely covering, the community. So we're only alerting you if you are across the street, or if you're in that store, or, if you're on the office cubicle next door. So that's why response times are good. It's because we're so close. We're only alerting people who are close.
That's a really incredible number. 800 a day. That means that, is that international or just the United States?
That's North American number, and you have
Okay.
to remember that like those are suspected cardiac arrests, so they're
Got it.
basically unconscious, unresponsive. So those are not all going to be cardiac arrests, but it's the dispatch center coding it as a cardiac arrest. They're suspecting it to be a cardiac arrest. So, maybe
Really,
70%
really,
of those are actually cardiac arrests.
that's wild. That's awesome. And I saw that you're doing a lot of work over with Google Business to help enhance the registry and get the word out for the AEDs that business owners can now report whether or not they have an AED in their workplace, and then that ties into the registry as well as to whether or not that AED is available during the business's open hours for dispatchers to see. Can you tell me a little bit more about the work that's being done to make sure that dispatchers have those tools at their fingertips when they have a cardiac arrest call?
Okay, Rich, that's a big question. So let me start with Google. In general, Google has been a huge partner of ours from the very beginning. We use their maps, their geocoding tools. When you add an AED in the registry, we link to the Google profile for business hours and to simplify data entry. We use predictive entry. So if you're using PulsePoint AED or AED.new on a browser and you're entering an AED, we're looking at where you are, and as you start to type the name of a business, we're looking around what business is near where you're at. We're doing predictions of, you're at this school, you pick that. We bring over all the location information, the business hours. We link to that Google business profile. Now, all businesses just about have a Google business profile. Businesses use this for business hours. They use it for their reviews. They use it for photos of their storefront. Lots of different reasons that a business would use it. It's your presence on Google, so it's really important. So with all businesses having a business profile, it's a very reliable source for us for this information. And it's trusted by the businesses because they'll say, hey, 4th of July is around the corner. Make sure that you have your business hours open for the 4th of July so people know. So when they get an email from Google Business Profile, they're opening it, they're considering it. These are thoughtful, important emails to the business. So Google has done campaigns with us. We've done nationwide campaigns where in these types of emails, they'll say, if you have an AED, make sure it's in the National Registry so that dispatchers can know where it's at. So that's what that sort of piece of that partnership is. But it kind of gets to the bigger goal. So originally, the AED registries were for our use to recommend to PulsePoint responders that there was AEDs nearby. That's why we needed a registry. But over time, we saw the value in the dispatchers knowing where the AEDs were as well. So you have somebody who's reporting a cardiac arrest, and the dispatch protocol might ask that person, is there an AED available? So the dispatch centers use medical protocols. And that's how a dispatcher who's not an ER physician can stop bleeding and start CPR and deliver a baby. And they have these protocols. And so the dispatcher will ask questions, and then the protocol will sort of drive the next question and then what the response should be. So they might ask, is the person breathing normally? Can you wake them? And then if those are no, then they're like, all right, we're going to assume cardiac arrest here. We're going to start CPR. And then the protocol might ask, is there an AED available? And then the person who's there might say, well, I'm visiting this museum. I don't know if there's an AED here. And then the dispatcher doesn't know. So both parties don't know if there's an AED available.
Yes.
So we've integrated the registry with all the protocols, all the different protocol vendors. So if there's a nearby AED, the protocol will tell the person there is an AED available at that location. Is there somebody there with you that we can send for the AED? So this relates to like TCPR, right? Where the dispatchers before used to say, our crews are en route, they'll be there soon. Kind of seems crazy, right? that they wouldn't like start CPR. Today, you're probably going to get telecommunicator CPR started. Seems like low hanging fruit, right? You got the dispatcher and let's get CPR started until our crews get here. Same thing. A lot of dispatch centers aren't yet recommending AED locations. So that's a big part of the work we're doing in the foundation is to make the registry available, build it, do all the integrations with the EMD, medical dispatch software systems so that dispatchers can recommend them to the callers. So it's CPR instructions, TCPR, and TAED, telecommunicator AED locations. We probably spend 50% of our resources on that.
I absolutely love how helpful that is, and being able to get that information to the dispatcher's hands. An AED registry is only as good as devices that are ready for rescue. So, just to kind of share a quick story, I was out, we find devices all the time that have, red markers or no longer flashing, expired pads, batteries, just around town. But one that was really remarkable, we were moving into a new office a few weeks ago, and we found that the office center, the business center that we were moving into, actually had a device that had expired pads from 2019, which means that device likely hadn't been looked at in over 6 years, which is just incredible to me. What sort of things is PulsePoint doing to encourage people to check devices and make sure that those devices are ready for use?
So obviously, AEDs under active management are the gold standard, right? So I think there would be a day that only AEDs under management are in the National Registry. As we're building that's one thing. Like those are special AEDs. But a lot of AEDs that aren't under management still have that risk. So there's a number of things we do. One is we partner with public safety in all cases. So agencies take their piece of the registry and they're going to be recommending those AEDs to their callers, which changes the value they put on making sure those AEDs are ready. So just that one thing alone, it's one thing to stand up at a Rotary meeting and say, hey, every business should have an AED. It's different to have your dispatchers recommending them during a cardiac arrest. So agencies are more diligent when they're using the registry to make sure that they are ready, inspecting them, making it part of a fire inspection or other building inspections. So that's one way. The jurisdictions take a greater role in the registry when the 911 center is recommending them. The other thing that we do is we involve the community in building the registry. So any member of the community can take the PulsePoint AED app and add an AED to the registry. Now it adds it in a pending state. It's not going to be recommended when it gets added, but then the agency is notified that a new AED has been added. But it makes the community look for AEDs, know where they are, and if they find an AED that appears not to be ready, they can immediately report it right in the app. So there's community awareness and surveillance of the AEDs that hasn't been there in the past. We take out billboards, electronic billboards in communities that show the number of AEDs and encourage citizens to report them, businesses to report them. So AEDs are much more front and center in a PulsePoint connected community and more integrated into the community messaging, public events, inserts in water bills, like various, business license requirements, other things that just raise the importance of ready AEDs. So not to spend too much time on that, but we're coming at that from a number of different approaches.
Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, that's one of the things that we see as the biggest struggles with AEDs in the community, and I love that you're making some efforts towards it. I'm curious, for a community to become a PulsePoint connected community, who is often the leader? Is it just members of the public downloading the app and now the community is connected, or is it coming from the top, from government or EMS?
Yeah, it can come from in other places. Sometimes there's grassroots efforts as there's more awareness of PulsePoint. There are grassroots efforts, from the community. but it can come from the 911 center. It can come from the fire department. It can come from a sheriff who is running the center. Sometimes it's a police, dispatch center. It can come from the elected officials. Elected officials are typically very big fans of PulsePoint because they're doing good in the community and they're involving their community. And there's a lot of public facing aspects of PulsePoint that are popular in the community. So although the spark can come from a lot of different places, it takes a number of people being on the same page to actually pull it off, right? The medical director might be involved. The dispatch center certainly is always involved. Our integration point is into the 911 center. Lots of times fire departments have the lead on it, but it can also be ancillary groups that are, working on a heart safe community effort. So it's definitely a team effort to pull it off.
That's awesome. We are finding part of our community, we are trying to bring PulsePoint officially to our community, and we are living it a little bit firsthand, where there are really amazing people in our community that are interested and excited, but we're seeing how you need to have all the right puzzle pieces in place. And but I think it's one of those things that pretty much everyone can be on board for, which has been really exciting to get involved in and see firsthand.
It's not that people aren't interested in doing it or against it. We don't find much of that. It's just priorities. Dispatch centers sometimes are, they're going through a dispatch system upgrade, or they're putting new radio systems in, or they're usually, have plenty of work already and they're not looking for something else to be added to the stack. That's probably the biggest, point of resistance that we see. Is just, we like the idea. It's just, we can't do it right now.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to what the reach is for PulsePoint right now in the United States?
So we cover about 30% of the population in the U.S. right now. And we have focused on the largest population areas, because like one interface going in, trying to, there's a lot of work to do the integration with the 911 system. So like an integration that gives us the most population, you can do an interface in, say, LA City and LA County, 2 interfaces, and cover 10 million people. So there's a lot of bang for your buck in those 2 interfaces. So we have, we have focused a little bit on that, but we've been at this now for about 12 years, and we continually increase the pace at which we can go. So some of it is just our limitations on how fast we can move. And in the beginning it was like a couple in a year, and now, it's dozens and dozens a year, but it still is a pretty heavy lift. Each integration is work, and then the marketing aspects in the community and the adoption and the training, it's not a light lift to fully implement and incorporate this through your dispatch center all the way out to members of your community. So as we've grown our size, we've been able to expand the number that we can do at a time. So we're largely the limitations on how fast we can go.
I guess that's a good problem to have. I'd love for you to speak on what some of the grassroots movements are, or not grassroots, but the efforts are to get the community involved. You mentioned the electronic billboards. I know you have some really creative other ways you guys have done it. I'd love to hear some of those examples.
Yeah, so we have a community outreach group, and just our approach to marketing, like how we do outreach, is our team can't do the outreach, across the country, across North America, right? So what we do is we build a lot of tools and a lot of strategies that then can be implemented by local communities. And many times we provide grants for agencies that have good ideas. And then we take those good ideas and we make them available to the other communities. So we fund the first good idea, which might be a billboard campaign. And we would maybe develop all the creatives and work with the billboard companies. We have a couple of billboard companies that give us sort of unsold space across the country, and then we can give it to the agencies to use, and we have the creatives already built, and we already have the interfaces from those billboard companies into the databases, so it can show how many AEDs they have or how many responders they have or those kinds of things. And so that would be one. The billboard's one, but we have transit campaigns that are, inside trains and buses, airport campaigns. We have coffee sleeves for maybe Valentine's Day. All your coffee shops in town have a PulsePoint coffee sleeve. And we always brand these for the agencies. It's not really, it's not just PulsePoint, but it's PulsePoint in the local community. So if you were to go to the website and go to marketing, you would see like all these different campaigns, gas pump videos. Like I can't, there's all kinds of things, handouts for various events. And so each agency has kind of led the example. Sometimes they put wraps on their vehicles. Fire departments have vehicles that maybe deliver supplies to the stations, and they wrap those because they're driving around town. We have kiosks in libraries and banners for municipal buildings, and huge banners that can be, hung across the city street or across aerial ladders. So there's like, you just go there and you get inspired, and we'd like that idea and that idea. And then we have a couple of ad agencies that develop all the materials, and then we just provide that to the agencies. And then they go out with their trusted voices and build their own campaigns. But, we do a lot of that work on, messaging and taglines and graphics and everything that, can be a little bit hard. And all they do is they get their logos on it, and then they take it out with whatever methods they want to use. So that's been very efficient for us, because just like I said, when it started with me, I was in my own community. I knew the local news stations. I knew I knew all the methods to get messages out in my own community. But as soon as we moved to a second agency, I don't know any of that, don't have any of those relationships, but I knew they had all those. So we just learned to prepare them to be efficient and effective, and make it easy on them. And that we've done that ever since. So we're not Procter & Gamble trying to market to the country. We're just trying to enable our own agencies to be as effective as they can. And they carry the message locally.
On that same marketing side, what is your personal favorite campaign that you've done?
I always like to see something new, and like some clever idea of something that that we haven't thought of. And I mean, I've seen sandcastle competitions, around cardiac arrest survival.
Wow.
We've got, we've got all these beach communities and, both coasts, and just kind of seeing how localization, what they've done that fit their community. We've seen apparatus stickers that say, we're a PulsePoint Connect community, download the app with a barcode. We've seen, we've seen all these campaigns, and we put them all on the website for other agencies to see them. But it's like when somebody comes up with like a new clever way, even like I told you the example of like a coffee sleeve. Hey, all our coffee shops in town on Valentine's Day all have a download PulsePoint, learn CPR, make sure your AED's in the registry. And it's like, the first time I saw that, hey, that's clever. But now, agencies have duplicated that. But at the time, I remember thinking, oh, that's a good idea. It was like one day they picked a day and made it and got all the coffee shops to agree. You see, that's the kind of thing we would never be able to do. But fire department can get all its local coffee shops to do something special to, help save a life, be part of the campaign. So
all right, so that the gauntlet is dropped for us. We're gonna have to come up with something really creative once we get our community connected.
We haven't seen before.
Sounds good.
All right, I'll take you up on. We got this on camera now, Rich. You can't get away from it.
We fund marketing campaigns all the time. We do annual grants on marketing all the time.
That's so cool. Well, I'm curious, your vision for the future. What are you excited for? What do you think's coming next?
I think for us, it's largely growing our footprint. I don't know if you've heard the saying that, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. PulsePoint was novel in the beginning, but now we can extremely reliably notify people who are near a cardiac arrest. If people have an AED, we can notify them very reliably that their AED is needed nearby. But we don't cover the whole country. So one of the things I'm excited about is to continue to try to increase the footprint and not have it like where you live determines like your likelihood of surviving. It's not just with PulsePoint, but we know that where you live does determine your chance of survival.
Yeah.
So I'd say, that's a very important one to me. The other thing that we're seeing that's very exciting is medical devices that can detect cardiac arrest and are not going to require a call to 911 first. So, like a watch, for example, the new Google Watch, the Pixel 3, can detect pulselessness. And when you look at interfacing to devices like that, they're going to be able to activate PulsePoint within seconds of detecting cardiac arrest, even in unwitnessed arrests. So that's going to open about 50% of cardiac arrests are unwitnessed. So if we can get those notifications, if it's witnessed or not witnessed, it's very, very fast. A call to 911 occurs. The dispatcher has to determine, what's going on here. Is this a fall? Is this an overdose? Is this a cardiac arrest? That takes time. Sometimes you've got, an untrained caller. The dispatcher's trying to figure out what's going on. There's a lot of room for error there. So medical devices, and it's going to be clothing, watches. It's going to be steering wheels on a car. We've seen shopping cart handles. Like people are innovating in this space where you're going to be able to determine cardiac arrest at a very high level of accuracy compared to like a phone call. So I do see a whole bunch of medical devices that are going to activate PulsePoint as a platform and be much faster. So that is something that we're facing like right now. Those products are right now either, like for example, that Pixel Watch is already FDA approved, but you've got other that are in the pipeline. So earlier notification and unwitnessed arrest is going to be huge. So that's exciting. I also think as dispatch centers approve, being able to electronically report to dispatch centers that there's a cardiac arrest and not have to go through the caller interrogation. I mean, if these devices, they're like having, say, AED pads on somebody's body, right? The watches, they're going to know it's a cardiac arrest to a very high accuracy. And just to be able to get that straight into the dispatch center without a voice component. Today, that voice component in most centers is required, the vast, vast majority. So we see new technologies to be able to transmit digital signals into the dispatch centers for those type of events. So that's a big one. I think the National Emergency AED Registry, having complete coverage of all the AEDs, and being able to make every AED alertable. So this is another thing that's very exciting is we want with the registry, with the National Registry, we want to make sure that we know where all the AEDs are. We want to make sure that the dispatchers in all the centers are recommending them if they're nearby. And we want to make sure that people who have access to that AED are alerted if that AED is needed nearby. So those are all things to be built out, say, over the next 5 to 10 years that are going to dramatically improve survival from cardiac arrest.
Wow. I have a question about the first half you were talking about with the wearables. Are most dispatch agencies equipped to receive that kind of information?
No, they're not today. So, so you think about a device that can detect cardiac arrest. They can pass that to us electronically, and we can activate PulsePoint immediately in like a 2 to 3 second sort of time frame. Now, the devices will usually have some time to double check. So a watch detects cardiac arrest. It's going to tell the user, hey, are you okay? And they're going to probably give that watch wearer 30 seconds or so to react to that before they create the signal, say to us, to activate people nearby and people who have AEDs. So you already have this little confirmation time where they're making sure for 30 seconds maybe, then they're giving the user another 30 seconds. Hey, are you okay? But you're going to be down to a very short window there. Then to notify 911, today that mostly is a voice call. So you have to take that signal, convert it into something that a dispatcher can understand. That's either a recording or it's an intermediate relay center. So you think about like how an OnStar works. Car crashes, OnStar gets the alert. OnStar can see all the telematics of the car. They call the dispatch center. They call the local dispatch center and say, hey, we have a vehicle accident at this location. So that's what's happening with cardiac arrest. Initially, it's going to be this intermediate relay center. And that's what I'm talking about, that going away in the next 5 to 10 years and being able to get that signal in, not just to a few really innovative centers, but kind of broadly across dispatch centers. That will improve accuracy and speed greatly.
That's really neat. I was just like flashing back to when text to 911 first became a thing, and that's still not a thing at many centers. So, and that was only a couple of years ago after we've been using, text messages for 20 or 30 years. So it's really neat that you'll be able to kind of bypass the voice reporting mechanism to be able to get that data into there a lot more accurately, because people don't know where they are, and a lot faster.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to be able to pass location, and you're going to be able to pass, look, this is a cardiac arrest, right? The device is going to be able to pass. Exactly. So you're not going to need that whole interrogation of the caller. And so you're going to improve accuracy and speed, greatly. So the wearables plus digital signaling, even though PulsePoint will be fast, you want to start the professionals fast as well. Those are exciting technologies that, are happening today.
If it's connected to a watch, will it also be able to send the demographics? This is Richard Shok, age 38. How old are you? 39? Like that kind of thing? Will that eventually be part of it?
Right. Wow. So you see there's all kinds of profile information in your phone now. And, if you opt in to share that, you're going to be able to, that's already the case now. That information is shared during a 911 call if you've opted in to allow that.
Well, I see we're kind of getting to the end of our time, so I want to make sure I ask my last question, give Rich a chance to jump in with anything else that's burning for him. But I'm curious if there's people that are listening that, they're not part of this is the first time they're learning about PulsePoint. What is their steps to become involved?
I think they can go to the website, pulsepoint.org, and there we have a lot of resources, and there's contact information there for them to reach out to us, and for us to then be able to provide resources, demonstrate the product to them, give them nearby, references, and just tell them all the steps that are needed to be done. They can start anyone can use the National Emergency AED Registry, the NEAR registry. So they can go to nearregistry.org and they can read about that. So any center can use the registry. It's available at no cost. They can start putting their AEDs into that. We have integrations on the NEAR registry into, all the popular call taking software packages. They could put that to use almost immediately. Even if they only put a couple of AEDs in, while those couple of AEDs will be recommended if they're nearby, they can build that over time. So really, somebody can champion that and in a couple of weeks have that all up and running. On the PulsePoint response side, notifying people who are nearby an event, that is a little bit more involved because we have to integrate into the 911 system. But once we integrate into a 911 system, any community that's covered by that 911 center will automatically be connected. So that's a little bit more involved process, usually like 90 days, but we'll walk them through everything that's involved in doing that.
And can a regular person just download the app and if they happen to be in a geographic area that's covered, kind of be made live? and
Yeah,
available to
so
respond?
if anyone can download the app is free. You can download the PulsePoint AED app and you can enter AEDs into the National Registry. You can download the PulsePoint Respond app, and if your city is PulsePoint connected, you'll have the ability to use it immediately. And if you're not PulsePoint connected, maybe where you work is or where you travel is, anywhere we see that device, we're going to alert if there's a cardiac arrest nearby.
Very neat. Um, Now, with so many activations, I mean, even on a daily basis, you must have a favorite story, something that's happened, someone that used the system to make a difference. What comes to the top of your head?
When there's so many good stories. I like to see when firefighters or off-duty professionals are responding to their neighbors. Those are like crazy good stories where people are taking their AED and running across the street. So I mentioned, it reminds me of Dr. Brooks. So Dr. Brooks is he's an emergency physician, works in an ER in Canada, and he has an AED in a cabinet mounted outside his house.
Mm.
And he's trained his neighbors, and they all know the AED's there if they need it. And recently, and he's also a large resuscitation scientist, and has been a mentor for years to PulsePoint. I met him. He flew to the fire department when this first came out, so he's always been a friend. And so he gets an AED needed alert. So AED needed alerts are you have an AED that's needed nearby. So he gets that alert. He's home asleep, and he takes his AED and he goes to his neighbor's house with the AED. His neighbor's in cardiac arrest. And you talk about a house call, right? You get an
Right.
ER doc to your house with his AED. And then later, when he goes on duty at the hospital, he's actually treating the guy in the ER.
Wow.
So you just kind of think about, and for him, being a big proponent of cabinet mounted AEDs, community response programs, for his neighbor to have him be the one that arrived, to help him, you just sort of look at like these pieces coming together in just like an amazing way. And we've had other ER docs, out of Harbor View and, out of the Seattle system, some of the top doctors in the country in cardiac arrest responding to PulsePoint alerts. We've had, a number of professional, paramedics and things respond from their homes to their neighbors. We've had other stories of like an ER physician responding to a PulsePoint alert, getting in the back of the ambulance, riding with the patient to their own ER. People that are responding are these, in many cases, highly trained individuals. And when we're bringing multiple people to the scene, you've got average people that are, trained in CPR because they're a teacher or a soccer coach or somebody who needs to know CPR. But we're bringing in an off-duty firefighter, a police officer, a nurse. We're bringing more people to the scene, so we're increasing also the quality of CPR that's being delivered, and it happens every single day, when somebody responds to an alert, and we survey our responders, like we know what's happening out there, and to hear their stories in their words and what it meant to them. Even an experienced firefighter that has responded to many, many, many cardiac arrests over their career, when they respond off duty and they're by themselves and they're in shorts and tennis shoes at a neighbor's house, is a totally, totally different experience and what that means to them. There's, you can't segregate these amazing stories from one another.
Wow. And all of that coming from a moment of tragedy and frustration and notes in the back of a napkin. That's really incredible, Rich.
But from a huge number of people, right? I don't want that focus to be on me. PulsePoint's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. it has a huge number of volunteers that have donated their time to make PulsePoint possible. And, you know, I'm sometimes the face of the organization. Nothing this significant happens without a really dedicated team, people that are putting their time into this because it's important to them and they believe in the mission. So a shout out to everybody that's been involved in all the various aspects to make something like this possible for our country.
I love that. That's it. It's so true for so many things that there are many people behind the scenes making what, you know, what a spark of inspiration might have brought, but bringing it to the world and really making a difference. So bravo to you, bravo to your team, bravo to
bravo
the,
for
the
you guys
volunteers.
for training people in CPR, placing AEDs. You're the ones that are like powering who gets that alert, right? This is a very broad coalition, and it's everybody who touches this industry. Like we're adding our piece to kind of boost what everybody's doing, but it's an awful lot of people, and a lot of people that were way before us, right? That sort of led the way to where we are today.
And that just gave me a thought. You know, we have roughly 70 training centers up and down the East Coast. We're going to do some research and we're going to find which ones are in existing PulsePoint markets. And we're going to put QR codes to download the PulsePoint app directly in the training center on the wall so that people have that information right in front of them. So that's something that we can immediately commit to doing.
We'll help you with all that.
This is what happens when you've been together for almost 20 years. I think we had the same thought at the same moment. Like, oh yeah, we could be creative and help make a difference. But like, you know, you said it's a nonprofit. There's not a alternative motive besides just getting trained people aware and getting them access. And, you know, just one more person with the right app in the right place at the right time can make the world of a difference to one person.
Yeah,
I love it.
Sure.
Rich, this has been wonderful. So grateful for your time. Look forward to continuing to work with you and see amazing things and seeing PulsePoint hit that 100% of the U.S. soon.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Rich, as well.
Thank you.
You have a great day, and thank you for joining us for Shok Talk.
Thank you.